The Muppet Show. Why don't we get things started? Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see we have people from Europe as well. If there are any people from East Asia, then thanks for waking up so ridiculously early or just not going to sleep. And welcome everyone to EMIC Virtual 2. EMIC is Embodied Mathematics, Imagination, and Cognition. We'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And this is our second virtual meeting. And this meeting will be in the form of a reading group. The paper in question is one that some of us here in this room recently co-authored in Frontiers in Education, called The Future of Embodied Design for Mathematics Teaching and Learning. So this meeting is, your participation is predicated either on that you've already read the paper or that you're very good at doing as if you read the paper. So who is EMIC and what are we doing here? Yeah, my name is Dor Abrahamson. So this guy here. Can you see my cursor? Yeah, thank you. And we'll soon meet other folks who are with us here. So EMIC, in 2015, a bunch of us began a working group at a conference. So the conference in question is PMENA. PMENA is quite a mouthful. PMENA stands for the annual meeting of the North American chapter of the International Group for the Psychology of Mathematics Education. Okay, so there'll be a quiz at the end. So PMENA, take notes. In 2015, a bunch of folks who are in general cognitive scientists, learning scientists, psychology researchers with interest specifically in mathematics, mathematical education, both as designers, but also using that as a context to develop theory of teaching, theory of learning, and reflexively of theory and frameworks of design. A bunch of people got together at PMENA, which you all know what that is now, and formed a working group. So at PMENA, which has been going on for dozens of years, there's this thing called a working group, which is folks who don't want to just go to symposia or talk. They want to have like this informal get together and, rolling up their sleeves and working every day. So 2015, Mitch, Martha, Ricardo, Candice, and Rogers formed this group. And then the years after as well, 16, 17, 18, 19, etc. And through this group, a cohort of folks from mathematics education research from PMENA, but also word was getting out, were interested more broadly in this group. And so as like in every good sitcom that is doing okay, we created this offshoot conference led by folks in Madison, which was called EMIC 1, Embodied Mathematics, Imagination, and Cognition. And here are some photographs from that event. So this was held in Madison in 2019. Lots of workshops, lots of just informal sitting and standing and running and figuring stuff out, introducing new technologies, big focus on gesture. And so this EMIC 1 Madison 2019 was the first time that this group got together outside of PMENA and formed this gathering, which included teachers and undergraduate students, graduate students, and faculty, all who are interested at these intersections of embodied cognition as a general theoretical orientation, mathematics education, mathematics content as a domain, mathematics education as a context for studying, but also technologies. The technologies, both those that enable one to build platforms for learning, but also technologies that enable one to investigate processes of learning. So multimodal learning analytics has been coming in increasingly, and many of us here are both embracing the new technology, the platforms for teaching and learning, and the platforms and instruments for investigating learning, and trying to see what all of this means for the theorization of models for understanding processes of teaching and learning. what all this means for an evaluation of the embodiment shift in a paradigm shift in the cognitive sciences, and how possibly could we contribute back to those developments of theory. The EMIC 1 was an opportunity also to bring together presentations that became papers. We were commissioned by Professor Jinfa Kai, then still JRME editor-in-chief, now it's Pat Herbst, to take our papers and make them into a book for Springer. That's something currently Mitch and I are working on. But there was also another opportunity. The other opportunity was to write a paper for Frontiers. And that is the paper we're talking about today. So the authors are myself, Dor Abrahamson, Mitch Nathan, Caro Williams-Pierce, Candace Walkington, Aaron Ottmar, Hortensia Soto, and Martha Alibali. And Caro is also, thanks Caro for all the tech support on all this. Now, the thing about papers such as these, it's really interesting because, you know, as in all of these kinds of groups of folks, how do you express a paper as something that you all believe in? I find that my favorite colleagues are those who share a domain of interest with me, but disagree with me on details of how to make sense of phenomena, how to develop constructs, how to interface with questions of epistemology, the ontology, the meanings of teaching and learning, mathematics, basic questions of what does it mean to learn, etc. That is us. That is us. We are a group, a cohort of authors, of researchers interested in the intersections of embodiment and mathematics, teaching and learning, and new technologies that are coming in. There are things that we agree on, which we try to epitomize here and bring for you in this paper. But for me, the more exciting, and I think for my colleagues as well, is where we disagree and we're still trying to fine tune. For example, so what exactly is the role of movement in teaching and learning? How should we conceptualize that? Who should be initiating new ways of moving to the extent that moving can lead to learning? So we tried in this paper to bring it's a bit like that, the Monty Python thing, the People's United Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front. Like is it embodied design or embodied pedagogy, learning, or is it an active learning? We could argue, until the cows come home on particular wording, but essentially we're all, look from the outside, I think we all look pretty much the same. We're all developing new sorts of technologies and new sorts of classroom practices that we believe are engaging certain intuitive and early and more unmediated ways of participating in social practices sensorimotorically, to try and engage those types of ways of being and acting and thinking as a means of grounding ultimately mathematical concepts. And we have different ideas on what grounding might look like, what it means, and in what points do we want to introduce symbolic notations. Some of us are working in environments where you begin from the symbolic notations and you create technologies to facilitate those actions of procedurally operating on those symbols. Other of us begin without any symbols at all in a context that might not look too much like mathematics, and beginning from there. So we come at this from many angles, but in the paper we try to bring together what we believe are the essences of these ideas. So here's Hortensia, here's Candace, and Aaron, and Mitch, and Caro, and myself with a friend, and Martha. The idea today is soon to break out into certain rooms according to folks' interests. But just to begin with, here's something I picked out of the paper. Here's something we all believe in. So as a cohort, we continue to investigate these tenets of embodied design. What is the meaning of mathematical concept is grounded in individuals' cognition in the form of modal processes, which are non-verbal and non-symbolic. This enactive know-how may complement, be redundant with, or be totally distinct from linguistic and inscriptional formalisms. So two, participants, like students, in embodied design activities discover and develop concept grounding enactive processes, even when they are not aware that or what they are learning. And finally, mathematics knowledge can cross the epistemic divide from enactive to linguistic symbolic through mediational processes that include discourse, reflection, expression, and argumentation using a variety of modalities and media. Gesture, in particular, is instrumental in sounding pre-semiotic processes into social interaction. So this idea of embodied design in and of itself, it's one focal interest of this group of authors. Some of us are not originally or centrally designers. Some of us are more cognitive scientists interested in gesture, who are using context of maybe embodied of design-based research, embodied design-based research as places to study these ideas. But this particular paper is on embodied design specifically. And even this phrase is something I try in the paper to talk about how I picked up this phrase in 2005, created the Embodied Design Research Laboratory, but then realized other people are doing similar things. And in this paper, we decided to use this phrase and as like a big tent. And in this tent to try and express who we are at the same time. Here are interesting tensions that invite research on how best to facilitate learning based on what learning even might be and embodiment might be. So we have our authors with us today, and I've thrown up some more slides, and Caro tells me you have access to these slides, and need not go through them, but just so you know that at the end of the paper, if you haven't seen, there's an appendix where each one of us authors has brought from within the paper, sort of copy pasted to the bottom, so in one place have the various principles that we drew out from our research to frame the work we do, and maybe to invite other people interested in these kinds of areas to engage in this form of research. And the idea today, it's not a lecture, I've already spoken way too much. As I said, we assume that you've looked at the paper and wish to enter in conversation with us, to ask us questions, to challenge us, to share your insights. And ultimately, really, I mean, I think, and I think my co-authors and colleagues and friends will agree with me. This is about building community of practice, of people doing this kind of work, interested in the intersections of embodiment theories and philosophy with mathematics education research, interested in the horizons of new technologies coming in, both as platforms for learning and as instruments for investigating learning. We want you to meet each other. We want you to exchange contact information. We want to build a network of EMIC folks, because we need each other to do this kind of work. And, you know, heck, when 5-6 years ago, when we just started this, it was like embodiment, wait, math, what? And somehow this seems to have been snowballed into a large number of people, like massive people internationally, who are interested in this. So I'm kind of humble that this has happened, but very excited to bring people into our midst, into our circles. And we want to learn from all of you, because I'm sure you come from places that we couldn't imagine, come from intellectual spaces, bringing your own contributions, and we're looking to see this grow. I should mention that we were all supposed to meet this summer again in EMIC 2, sort of in the flesh, in EMIC 2 in Colorado. Hortensia worked very hard to get us funding and to build it. And, you know, we already had like a ticket accommodation. Then, of course, bang as COVID set in. So that didn't happen, which is why Caro said, "Hey, let's go virtual." So we had the previous EMIC series of talks and discussions, and today the idea was to do a reading group, and we welcome suggestions to do things in the future until we can meet again all together in the same place. So please do think of this as an opportunity to get to know us, get to know each other, um, back channel and chat privately, get your contact information. And of course, we can always help you meet each other through this. And I believe what we're going to do now, we're going to spend the next about 50 minutes in breakout rooms. The way to do it, we're going to have two cycles, each of about 25 minutes. 25 minutes in breakout rooms and sort of come up for air. And then again, 25 minutes in breakout rooms, where depending on our tech wizard, Caro, we'll see if we can actually do it thematically, so you can all join in the particular group or the particular author whose work want to be more interested in, or that line of research. Or it could be that all Caro can do is to throw us into random rooms, and then you can go, oh my gosh, I got into that room. How do I get out of here? Until you go out to the main room, and then she reassigns you, something of the sort. So maybe Caro, if you want to jump in and explain how this will happen now. But again, just a word of welcome. I see we have 43 participants. So without the authors, that's still, and the backup of graduate students, we're still over 30 people, which is just wonderful. So Caro, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dor. All right. So everybody, one of the tricky things about planning for a reading group virtually is we had no idea how many people were going to show up. So we have a bunch of wonderful backup folks, but I think we're not going to need them today. So backup folks, you just get to hang out and enjoy. The system that I think will work best based upon some of the conversations we had right before this started is I'm going to open up some rooms, some breakout rooms with each author, and I'm going to follow the authorship order. So room 1 is Dor, room 2 is Mitch. Then we're going to skip to room 4, which is Candace, because room 3 is going to be right here where you are, because that's me. And I'm going to be doing some tech stuff too. Nihal, as my backup, will you stick around in this room just in case tech stuff takes a little too much for me, please? So you don't get to relax. Okay. Now, can we have another 2 hours to talk about this? Again, many thanks to everybody who sat in this room with me and Nihal while I was dealing with the technology. And your patience is like so appreciated.
I guess we have a couple minutes. I wonder if anybody wants to say something they may have learned that they didn't know coming into it all.
Caro, until when is the general meeting today? How much more time do we have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would recommend that we just let people know that they can leave if they have to, but we still try to do some like group summary and just go a bit late. That's my suggestion.
Okay. Should maybe a person from each room just say some highlights from conversation? So I'll try and make it very quickly. I was room 1. We had a question about, so why do eye tracking? How does it help us in substantiating claims, in evaluating our hypotheses? So I spoke about tracking the emergence of new sensory motor patterns. There was a question about different activity architectures. So we developed, coming from ecological dynamics, speaking about this triad of the agent and the task and the environment, and how tweaking those three can create different kinds of experiences. We were chatting about GeoGebra as well. And at some point talking about dual eye tracking, where you can track both how the child and the student and the teacher are looking, and figure out through that different approaches to pedagogy and how people can engage in joint action without being in joint attention. And finally, there were questions about dissemination of technology to places with less resources, and what are the futures of technologies and that embed a cultural agent such as an artificially intelligent teacher into these apps, so that you can be guided to coordinate between learning to move in new ways and learning new concepts. So that's it from room 1.
So I was the standard bearer for room 2, but I'm not going to summarize. I'm going to just invite anyone who attended either session of room 2, if you want to just say something you learned that you didn't know coming in. We talked about transduction, action, cognition, transduction, how actions and thinking manifest one another.
TikTok.
Maybe nothing got learned.
No, I had my microphone. I think just the importance of both directions, you know, from action to cognition and from cognition to action, that those are both part of the entirety was an important point.
Oh, another thing I wanted to add about what I asked during the group is that it is, I think what I got from Mitch's response is that the value of having different people coming from different disciplines to answer these questions. We're using very different methods and from different perspectives, but we all contribute to the field as like gathering the knowledge. So I thought that's really cool.
Room 3, would that be Caro? Maybe she's doing tech stuff. Should we?
No, I'm here. Hi. Goodness, what did we talk about? I will actually say that I had planned open-ended questions that were less sort of me-centric, but then the time went really fast with folks just asking me questions about Rolly's adventure and the way that I think about games and embodied cognition. Yeah, which I can blabber on for hours about, but it was a lot of fun. We talked about mathematical play and gesture and designing for those things. And then we didn't quite have time to finish Paul's really big question at the end, but he asked how like failure and feedback as part of this cycle of hypotheses, this is all part of my mathematical play work, how we can think about failure and feedback in environments that aren't video games, because in video games, like it is a part of the expectation that failure and feedback will be there. So when failure comes, feedback's paired with it, the failure is a thing, etc. But so like, how does that help if we're thinking about mathematical play in a classroom, whether you're, you know, in an undergraduate or early childhood or etc. Anybody else in my group want to, I know we talked about a lot of really cool stuff. So what did I miss? Guess nothing. All right. It was lovely. I had a really, really good time. And I just, everybody here who got to go promptly to their groups and start conversing, thanks to my group and the people who weren't able to put themselves in breakout rooms, you all were so patient and delightful, and thank you, and I'm sorry.
Room 5?
Yeah, I was room 4, and you know, both groups had a really wonderful diversity of perspectives and backgrounds, which we really made for really good discussions. We talked about how students can embody ideas in virtual or online settings, including using VR technology, but other ideas as well. We also talked about how teachers and students can kind of take ownership of embodied learning and of using movement and gesture in the mathematics classroom, and how we can design such that that will happen kind of organically. And then finally, we talked about what kind of mathematical information or what kind of mathematics concepts lend themselves to gestures, although we kind of agreed that maybe there weren't particular concepts that did, but rather the kinds of gestures and the way that you use them with other media or with other people changes based on the nature of the mathematical concepts. Yeah, those are our main discussion points.
Over to room 5, please.
Yeah. We in both groups, we did things a little bit. The first group was much more about the design and development process of ways that kind of different technologies have to emerge over time through development, and the challenges of starting from an idea and moving it towards a tool and then scaling up. And then the second group talked a lot more about graphical representations and linking them to notation and ways that tools can support that bridging. And so we actually in the session spent a lot of time playing with some of the new tools that I've been working on, moving the power from the students to the teacher, and creating classroom-based tools that kind of facilitate that open-ended exploration. And actually we talked a lot about ways that Jen, who's in the room, has used it in her classroom for virtual learning, but also for thinking about ways that kids internalize the actions and use them to kind of help promote their thinking as they move forward. So I think really thinking about ways that we can expand beyond one area and focus and bridge into multiple representations or multiple contexts is where our discussions ended up going.
Thank you. Martha, are you the next?
No,
person?
I think I am, Dor.
Okay, please go ahead.
And actually, I would like, I'm going to call out on a couple people. Chris, I'm wondering if you could just kind of give us a 30-second blurb about what you learned on round 1.
Yeah, quite a bit. It's funny because going 2 in a row, it's like, what did I do the first time? It feels like a long distance has passed, but really just, so I teach college, and so thinking about applying gestural and embodied mathematics versus larger scale versus smaller scale. So Tensi and I discussed an activity that would involve like a full scale parabola and using your full body to show the slope at different points for like a calculus course. So just kind of thinking about what that would look like in a physical versus a virtual space, and the ways that you could adapt that equitably to different types of technological home situations now in this virtual world. Those were a couple of things we talked about. There were other things too, but there's a lot. So but yeah, that was but quite a bit. But really just thinking about the necessity for embodied instruction and a thought toward that, and getting faculty to think about what it means to use embodied instruction and not being outliers and using that this is something that should be normative.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that one of the questions that was posed earlier was Hannah, who has left, but she asked about how do we help K through 16 teachers to become more informed about embodiment, and besides PD and research journals, because research journals are really not accessible to practitioners. And so and she suggested maybe a blog, which I think is a great idea. And I know that was one of the action items that we hoped would result from workshop 2. We still intend for that to happen. But I think the other thing that we need to think deeply about is how do we showcase our work in practitioner journals and not just in research journals, so that it is more accessible to our teachers, whether it's through an NCTM journal or one of their state affiliates. And I think that would be valuable and something for us to think about. That's probably my 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I think my room was last. We talked about a range of things. One theme I think that I can pull out is we talked about what makes something a gesture. And we talked about, for example, the rhythmic movements that people with autism who are nonverbal sometimes produce and how they pattern and whether they constitute gesture. We talked about whether writing, certain forms of writing that might be aligning with speech might also be forms of gesture. We talked about directed action, and we talked about yeah, so just a range of things, like where the sort of line is from action to gesture to drawing, and how the different conditions, like communicating via Zoom versus communicating face-to-face, via communicating, you know, at the head of a classroom, might actually lead to variations in the way we deploy these different forms that might all be serving some similar functions. We also talked about consistency in gesture. So whether for particular math concepts, there are particular gestures that may recur and that may be a marker of particular ways of thinking. We talked about a lot of a wide range of other things as well. I'm sorry that I have to go because I have another meeting that I'm actually supposed to be at already. So I'm going to take this moment to say thank you to you all. Thanks to those who came and discussed in my breakout room, and thanks to all who are here. It's great to see this community coming together. And I fully support your suggestions, Tensia, about how we can get some of these ideas out also to those who can use them in their pedagogy. So thank you.
Hi, Martha.
Thanks, Martha.
I just put an article that Candace and one of her colleagues co-authored just last winter, I think. I don't know, it wasn't that long ago. That's designed specifically for teachers, and I think is written in a very accessible way. And so people can feel free. I believe you can just download the article from this link, but there's also the reference.
I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking everyone for coming today. This particular paper was just a milestone in the journey, and it created for us an opportunity to gather all together. And as my colleagues have said, you should feel these conversations. Every question I had, it should have been a week rather than like 13 seconds. And so please think of it as an opportunity we're inviting you to engage in conversations. And we hope to play a certain role, maybe a leading role in keeping these conversations going, also through the online resources that Caro is creating and improving for us all the time. So please feel free to keep in contact with us. If you're trying to find each other, you can do it also through Caro or me. We'll help you find each other. And the recording of the session will be eventually made accessible to all. So thanks for being with us today. Caro, any other words?
I don't think so. Yeah, thank you all. This is lovely. And Dor, thanks for being the spearheader of all of this. Yeah.
Sure. Great pleasure.
And Caro, if people are interested in joining this EMIC group, what is the best way for them to do that?
So if you go to embodiedmathematics.com, you'll see our website. That's where we post announcements and etc. You can, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can join our little listserv so that you will get an email when an announcement goes out. And those announcements include things like EMIC virtual number 3 will be announced there. When EMIC 2 is able to happen after the pandemic, the opportunity to apply and participate will go through there. When the book comes out, the email will go there. We don't spam you, I promise. It's just every now and then to keep you updated on what we're doing. You can also go to Embodied Math is our Twitter user handle. I go through that pretty regularly and retweet things that I think are relevant to the community, but feel free to tag me and I'll retweet it just to get it out there. But you'll find a lot of Embodied Math account follows a lot of the folks that are here. So that's also a really good way to find other people.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Go
staying extra
forth.
time.
Think about things in new ways.